Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us again here at Cold Case Christianity. I am J. Warner Wallace. We've been talking in the last several weeks about the need to train young students. When people ask me, well, how do we turn the corner? How do we stop the exodus of young people, of people in general, from what they used to claim was a Christian affiliation to now what they would say is no religious affiliation at all? When they check that form under what they believe or what they claim to be, Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or whatever, more and more people are checking the none box, no religious affiliation, and we call this the rise of the nones. Now, what do we do about this as Christians? Do we just accept that this is the trend we're on? More and more year, people find themselves unaffiliated with any religious beliefs? Or is this something that God is completely in control of? Or might God use us in some way as the means by which to make a case for the truth of the Christian worldview? And what approach should we take with our believing children to give them the confidence that this is true? Even if they might already say, hey, yeah, Pop, I know it's true, but you don't seem like you're living this way. How do I turn that corner with my own students in youth ministries, your own kids, your biological children? Well, I've offered a solution to this, and it sounds rather controversial when I first say it, but if you've watched our show in the past, I think you know where I'm coming from on this. I always say it the same way. We need to stop teaching young people. It's not working. We've been teaching young people for decades, and it doesn't seem to be stemming the exodus. So what do we do differently? Well, we stop teaching and we start training. And training is a very different approach to preparing people for a mission. As I've said in the past, training is what first responders do, getting ready for that call they might have to handle tomorrow. Training is what boxers, MMA fighters, athletes do. Why do they train? Because they know they've got scheduled games or a scheduled bout that they're going to have to actually defend themselves in. So now they are paying close attention to detail, close attention to what they're doing, because they are getting ready for a challenge. And that is the difference between teaching and training. Much of it simply has to do with the fact that teaching without a scheduled fight, a scheduled challenge of some nature, is not nearly as effective as teaching and training up to an event. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit more on this episode. For those of you who are maybe feel like you haven't been a good model maybe for people around you. You yourself are not as equipped as you'd like to be to make a case for what you believe as a Christian. Well, now is the time for you to start training. This isn't just for young people. This is for all of us. And I have been training as a first responder for over a quarter century. And I have continued to train as a Christian case maker because you never know when that question is going to be asked around the corner that you're going to need an answer for, especially in the position I'm in sometimes when I'm on a public stage. So I want to take the second of 5 letters in the TRAIN acronym, TRAIN, and how you train rather than teach. The T is for testing. We've talked about that in other episodes. How you test yourself to see where you're deficient. And without a test, you really can't know how badly you need to work, how hard you need to work. Now, once you take the test, if you don't do well on the test, you'll have a greater sense of urgency, a greater sense of a felt need in your own training. So take the test. I've offered that in an episode before this. I'm not going to go ahead and cover that again. What I want to do this week is talk about the R. The R is about raising the bar beyond what you think you can handle, beyond what you think your students can handle, beyond what you think your kids can handle. You've got to raise the bar. Now, this might seem like a silly, or maybe even like you don't need to say this, but most of us don't raise the bar when it comes to our training in spiritual matters. As a matter of fact, even as a youth pastor, I found myself kind of, falling into the trap that a lot of youth pastors do, where I was evaluating my own ministry, and even my leadership in my church was evaluating my ministry on the basis of, well, is anybody attending? Is this growing in some way? I mean, how do we measure our success in ministry? Often we do it with metrics that deal with growth of numbers, those kinds of things. And if you're a youth pastor, you know how hard it can be sometimes to get young people to devote themselves to this option when there are so many others, when there are so many other distractions in life. Well, I found myself doing what a lot of other youth pastors do. I found myself buying a lot of pizza. I didn't do a single message on any given weekend without first playing a game of some sort. I had a collection on my bookshelf back in those days that were almost all just different collections of physical games you could play, of youth pastorate activities, because I was trying to be creative and try to provide something new every week, and it wasn't easy. And to be honest with you, it wasn't effective either. Because that first year in which I was playing games and eating a lot of pizza with my students was the year that my students walked away when they were seniors and graduated from high school. It was time to do something different. So I decided that I was going to have to raise the bar on what I was teaching them. Now, this can seem like, wow, how do you get your students to care? Well, I tested them first. I showed them where their weaknesses were. So I'll give you an example of this. One year we took them to, every year in June we would go to Salt Lake City. And I would have either real missionaries or I would role play or bring in, if I could find a bishop, local Mormon bishop, I would bring them in just for a polite Q&A. And after about an hour, my students in the first year, they found themselves flummoxed. They could not respond to some of the claims that were made by the Mormon bishop. As a matter of fact, the bishop made these claims and they found themselves wanting to say something that didn't quite sound right to them, but they found themselves ill-equipped from their own scripture. They found that the Mormon bishop was, and this is a layperson, remember, in the Mormon church, bishops are just folks like me who get to a certain age and they serve as bishops. They're lay people, they're not paid. They knew more about our scripture than our students did. That was troubling and it was motivating. So then I said, okay, we're going to raise the bar. Now, we have to do this with young people. And once you've shown them their need, they are far more likely to do it. Now, there are some tricks to it, and I'll talk about those after the break. But when I go to the break, I want to play for you, in a recent episode, I showed you kind of behind the scenes at Summit Worldview Conference, where I serve as a faculty member. It's an amazing 2-week immersion program. You send your students to this, either in the state of Tennessee, they do 2 sessions. In California, we do 1, which we did about a week and a half ago. And in Colorado, in Manitou Springs, next to Colorado Springs, we do 6 sessions annually. Every other week, I fly in and I teach at Summit Worldview Conference in Manitou Springs, Colorado. It is an amazing time where we raise the bar for students. And when you watch this video I'm going to show you in a minute, I want you to take a look at the energy level of the students. What's fascinating to me is that we'll put those students, through 8 hours of lectures sometimes in a single day. 8 hours a day, over again for 2 weeks. We do a lot of other fun things, don't get me wrong, but we've raised the academic bar dramatically. And you might think, who in the heck would want to go to that? Oh, really? They love it. They come back. They want to come back over and over and over again. A lot of these students will come back and serve as staff after they've been there at least twice. They can come back and serve as staff. I'm telling you, there is an energy in this group that's palpable. Really? In other words, there's no pizza or no, there's no games. There's activities, but in the classroom we don't play games. We are focusing on the issues. I can't tell you the level at which I'm teaching these students. And of course, we eat together. We play together, and we have a community together. And we raise the bar academically, and we teach them a Christian worldview like no other experience they're probably ever going to have in their entire life. Watch the video, and then we'll talk about it when I come back. If I told you we're going to go and study Christianity as a worldview, and I could guarantee you that at the end of that time, you would say, I want to do that again. That's what Summit Worldview Conference is.
There are 3 great struggles young adults are facing today. The first one is the question of purpose. What am I supposed to do with my life? What does God want from me? What is His will? The second one is their place. Where are they in life? If we were to float off down the river like Huckleberry Finn, would anybody even miss us? And then the third question is the question of truth. What is actually true? Everybody's out there making truth claims. How do I know that what I understand to be true about the world is actually true?
A summit is really a place to come and learn how to think.
Knowledge is really key in our faith. Knowing what we believe, knowing how to defend that, knowing what other people believe.
Having this amazing walk with a creator, a king, who loves you despite what you do.
This is what's huge. Rorty and Nietzsche are right. Without God, everything's up in the air.
You've got to study it so it becomes a part of you.
But unfortunately, Christians, we are perceived to be against gay people.
What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us.
Relationship is not something God does. Relationship is something God is.
We really focus on that. Time around the table to eat meals together, time at the park playing together, time with mentors, talking with them one-on-one, time in small groups to process through the things you've learned. Because it's in those relationships that truth really takes root.
I think the coolest part of relationships here is that you are living out your faith alongside other people. And so I think that's one of the biggest things I've taken out of Summit, that faith is a community thing. It's something that you do together with other Christians.
Imagine if you could spend 2 weeks in a place where the best leaders in America would stand before you and challenge you and give you a sense of responsibility for what's going on in the world. And then imagine turning around and realizing you're sitting next to people who are gifted and fun to be around, and they love God, and they're preparing as well to be the sort of leaders who will be the future politicians, the future authors, the future scientists, great moms and dads. And you realize that Summit is more than just an experience of learning in a classroom. It's actually a way to get together with those who will be the future leaders and begin networking and growing with them now.
It's a lifelong experience. It's not just these 2 weeks. They'll impact the rest of my life for sure.
Summit's just been a great place. It almost feels like home here.
Whether you come to Colorado, whether you go to Tennessee, whether you go out to LA and Biola and do this, it's going to be fabulous. Trust me, you're going to want to be here. Come to Summit.
This is the one place I tell people. I say, if you're going to do one thing before you go to college, even after you're in college, if you're going to do one thing, you need to come for the 2 weeks at the Summit.
Spend 2 weeks with some of the best and brightest scholars in their fields on every aspect of Christian worldview, from Bible to cultural engagement to other religious systems. I guarantee you won't regret it, and you'll leave smarter, happier, and I think more devoted to Jesus than ever.
Now you can see that that's really, if you look at the video they put together as a promo for the camp, for the Worldview Conference, you'll see that it looks like, wow, like there's a lot of activity, a lot of fun, you're doing a lot of physical things as well. And it's all rooted in our attempt to raise the bar academically. And once we've raised the bar academically, everything else opens up for us. All the other doors open up. That's why it's so important for us to be able to raise that bar. You'd be surprised what your students will do. You'll be surprised when you take this seriously. You know, a lot of it is I think we don't sometimes take our Christian worldview seriously in front of our students, then we wonder why they don't. But if you take it seriously and you put them in scenarios, which we're going to talk about in the future, downfield, that'll actually activate what they're learning, and you tell them in advance that we're going to have that activation point, oh my gosh, they will raise the bar. I noticed this in my own children's lives, because at the time I was a youth pastor, I did not have high school age children of my own. My kids were either just coming into junior high or early elementary. My girls were very young. And I was at a small church. My kids, my own children, biological children, did not want to go in their affinity groups, in their children's ministry. They wanted to stay with mom and dad working with high schoolers. And we thought, okay, you want to stay with us, you can stay with us. And sure enough, they did. And it wasn't long before I realized that I was teaching my high schoolers at a college level, and I was in charge of high school and junior high. And I didn't make it any easier for my junior hires. As a matter of fact, they were getting everything at the same level my high schoolers were. I don't even know how they hung with it, to be honest with you, at times, because there was times when I was overwhelming. I felt like I was overwhelming my high schoolers. But you know what? People were engaged. And the junior hires were engaged because I didn't treat them like kids. I treated them like they were my age. I treated them like adults. We just said, we're going to do this. This is important. You need to know. Now, I will tell you this. I did make it entirely visual. And that is an important key to this when you're working with young people. It's probably even key for anyone anymore. And if you yourself, if you're trying to get trained up, I want you to shoot high for yourself. And I want you to start watching. If you're a visual person, there's so much on YouTube even from good Christian teachers. But you can search these. I've got several links at my website, different places you can go. And we of course, have an entire library of videos, over 200, at the YouTube page for Cold Case Christianity. But my point is, I was raising the bar really high. And then I realized I've got junior hires in the room. They seem to be able to go along for the ride. And I mean, I'm passionate. That's part of it, right? You got to be passionate. If you're passionate, they'll become passionate. They'll catch whatever attitude top down from leadership. So if you're not passionate about these things, if you don't think these are worth looking at, or worth talking about, or worth thinking about, then don't think your kids are going to. They're not. And by the way, your friends at work won't either. If you aren't a contagious Christian, Mark Middleburg's book, right? But I mean, honestly, this idea that I want my passion to be contagious, because once I realized the passion of God, it was contagious for me. Now, as I was doing it with high schoolers, I noticed that my junior hires were willing to raise up the bar for themselves. And then years later, I had my daughter. She was probably around 17 or 18 at the time, and she was working at a book table with me at an event where I was a speaker. And she was watching the whole thing, watched my talks. At the end of the day, at the end of the talk, she would be at the book table. And at one point she said to me, I could give your talk word for word. I've heard it so many times. And I'll tell you what, I think I'd be funnier than you, because I'm a funnier person than you. And I thought, I bet she could give that talk word for word, because she's heard that stuff since she was in elementary school. Here's how I drew it in the book, Forensic Faith. I drew it as, in the past, I know that Lee Strobel, my good friend, who wrote The Case for Christ, he has described it as ricochet apologetics, right? Or ricochet evangelism, rather. And I described this as ricochet apologetics. In other words, I was aiming high, probably even higher than my high schoolers. But they caught it. My high schoolers caught it. And what they didn't catch, and even what they did catch, it bounced off the high schoolers. And before I knew it, my own elementary school children were catching it. They were able to raise their own bar high enough to raise their own attention level. I made it visual. I gave them a goal we were working toward. I tested them first to show them their need. And I stayed passionate. That helped me to train up a group. Now let me ask you a question. Are you training? Have you even raised the bar for yourself? If you were to purchase a Christian book, what kind of book would it be? A devotional? Would it be something that's easy reading? There are such things. Or are you filling your bookshelves with the stuff that really is challenging you, that is stretching you, even from the other perspective, from the other point of view? We have to raise the bar. We have to do a couple of things here. We have to train. And we'll talk more about the kind of content of this in future episodes. But you have to raise the bar, have a greater expectation. Let's put it that way. If you thought you were going to get in shape and you were out of shape, you'd find yourself charting a course for yourself, either a running schedule at the gym, some kind of a schedule. And in that schedule, I suspect you would probably raise the bar. You'd probably have to say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to have to do a little bit better than this. I'm going to have to raise. That's what we do at Summit Worldview Conference. We are constantly and consistently raising the bar to the point where people who visit us, people who hear about the program, they'll say, I don't know. You're asking an awful lot from Christian students. I actually have a story of a student whose mom told me that she sent him to the Summit Worldview Conference because she was more concerned about where he was spiritually than he was even concerned, and he didn't really want to go. And after the first day, usually that first Sunday is pretty active. They come in, people are getting there on planes and buses and however they're getting there, and they'll take them sometimes whitewater rafting or hiking the first day. So now Monday comes along and these kids are pooped, okay? They're tired. And now you have the first 8-hour, 10-hour session in the classroom. And after that first day, her son wrote to her, or called her, texted her, that's what it was, and said, hey, I don't know if I can stay here. This is too much. By day 3, he said, never mind, I can make it. And he stayed the entire 2 weeks, even though he didn't want to go, because that entire time he was there, he found himself getting answers for questions he'd had for a long time. High-level questions. And he found that people there were treating him as though he could raise the bar, he was capable of that, and with that great respect, he was willing to raise the bar for himself. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I just want to finish talking about the need for raising the bar and how that might apply to you personally. I have the great honor, really, of speaking to church groups all over the country. And maybe about a year into doing that, I started to think, well, I've got this opportunity to ask some questions too, right? Not just give all the answers, but I want to ask some questions. And the question I became most fond of is, hey, everyone here, stop for a second. Tell me, why are all of you Christians? Why are you a Christian? And some people are hesitant to even give you an answer, but those who did give me answers, after a while I realized, wow, they're coming back in the same categories over and over and over again. I'm learning something about why the church, why people in the church think Christianity is true from their answers. The most popular answer I get by far is, I was raised in the church, or my parents were Christians, something like that, right? Where they just have always known Christianity because they were raised that way. Okay, great. That's a good reason to be a Christian. I have no problem with that. Number 2, I've had some experience that confirmed for me that Christianity was true. A prayer was answered, someone was healed. Something happened that I saw that confirmed for me in my own experience that Christianity is true. Okay, great. That's another good answer. Another kind of similar to this second is the third, which is, I used to be a jerk, and then I met Jesus and I'm not so much a jerk anymore. Jesus changed me. That's a good answer. The fourth is sometimes theological. Well, I didn't make this decision at all. It was God who worked through the Holy Spirit to bring me to Him. It's offered as some kind of theological response. Perfect. That's all true. Great. Those are the 4 answers I get. And you might look at those 4 answers and say, okay, that's interesting. But then it dawned on me. I have a family that is mostly atheists, but I do have a few believers in my family, but they're not Christian believers. They're Mormon believers. They were raised as LDS church members, Latter-day Saints. And if you were to ask my Mormon family, why are you a Mormon? Do you know what they say? Exact same answers, and virtually the same order. Now, it turns out that most of us who are Christians who have examined Mormonism will agree that Mormonism is not true. It is not historically true, it's not factually true. Yet their answers sound just like ours as Christians. They hold to a faith that I think is actually unreasonable because we now have evidence to demonstrate that it's not true. Yet they hold to it. And they come to that belief in the exact same way that most of us as Christians have come to our beliefs. Now, it turns out there's a big difference between Mormonism and Christianity, in that you could actually make a case evidentially for Christianity, which you can't do for Mormonism. So my question is, if that's one of your answers, it's been one of your answers, why would you want to stop there? Because that's the answer that every believer of every religious faith gives. We could all give those answers. But if you're a Christian, you could actually articulate scientific reasons for why God exists. You could articulate historical facts that demonstrate the historicity of Jesus, the historicity and reliability of the Scripture. You could do all of that if you chose to. But you'd have to decide to move from an unreasonable faith and move from a blind faith to a forensic faith. Okay, now if you're like me, you know that sometimes it's hard to get started on something. And you might be wondering how getting to know the case better, how knowing the evidence for Christianity would even change your life as a Christian to begin with. Well, I'll tell you one thing I'll give you, is more courage. And I know that to be true because anytime you increase your evidential understanding of something, you also increase the courage with which you are willing to talk about it. Do you remember when you were in school and you would go to a test on the day of a test? You know, it's Friday and the teacher says there's going to be a test on Friday, and you all know that, and you get there on Friday and there's always one guy or two people, one guy or one gal who's like really excited. You know, she's bouncing around, she's happy to be there, she's happy it's test day. Then there's the rest of us who are like, what is wrong with you? It's a test today. Why in the world would you be excited about this? Well, you know why she's excited. She's excited because she's prepared. She studied for this thing. She can't wait to show the teacher how much she knows. There's a correlation between your preparedness, your readiness, and your degree of joy and courage and engagement. Yeah, I get it. We sometimes don't want to even approach people with our claims. We don't even want to approach people to share the gospel because we're not quite sure how to get started. We don't quite know if we'll be able to answer every question. We're not prepared. And that's why we don't have that energy, that passion, that joy we would have. You trust me on this. If you take the time to actually learn what the evidence is, to be able to make the case for what you believe, and you will see that your engagement increases. And you'll see that your confidence and courage during those engagements will increase. Look, it's about calendaring it on your scheduling the time. It's about discretionary time. It really is. It's about, are you willing to set aside other things you're doing to do this in preparation? And you might feel like the task is daunting. I told you in one episode I had to read 132 books to write God's crime scene. They're all sitting back here in the corner above my sleeping dog, which I'm sure you can see there. Bailey is sleeping in the room with me here. But the point is, that's a lot of books to read. And I can understand why you might find that daunting. So where do you start? When there are so many pieces of evidence you could examine, so many pieces of evidence you could spend time studying and mastering. Well, I would suggest you pick the one that you're most interested in, that one line of argumentation, that one piece of evidence you're just fascinated with, and just specialize in that for a while, camp in that. And don't try to do all of it all at once. I wrote this in Forensic Faith. I thought it was a great quote when I first got it. It's from the United States Army Chief of Staff, Crichton Abrams. He once said this, quote, "When eating an elephant, take one bite at a time," unquote. That's right. This is an elephant, and you're going to have to take it one bite at a time. That's okay. Start. That's the thing that's keeping you from doing it. It's the starting. Once you start a diet, it's easier to stay on the diet. Once you start an exercise program, it's easier to stay on the exercise program. Once you start studying, it's easier to keep studying. I'm suggesting that all of us need to be informed. That it will take some work, but you will not regret it. And I hope we've been a small part of that process for you. I'll see you back here next week at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity. A homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels. It's available wherever books are sold.